Well, what was it like being Helen Reddy during the I Am Woman phase? But it must have been a very heady period of success and sense of accomplishment for you.
I don't remember it that way. I don't remember it that way. I remember it as being terribly stressful. It was a very difficult period. There were all the deaths and that was all happening at the same time as the success. So I never really got to enjoy the success in the way I imagined I would.
Well, in the midst of all this success, in this period, you also were having family tragedy at home with the loss of many of your closest relatives, and things at home in the US weren't good either.
No. My husband at the time had a severe drug problem, which just kept getting worse and worse, and strange, I'd been attracted, one of the reasons that I'd been attracted to him was because he didn't drink. And my first husband had been alcoholic. I thought, well, I've solved that problem. But he was a drug addict. So there were a lot of debts that were run up that I didn't know about. There was a lot of things that went on that I simply didn't know about. And yes, it was difficult. Most people don't know it, but recording artists don't make very much money through recording. They make money by going on the road. It's the tours that make money, not the recordings. So I just kept going, and it took me 17 years to pay off the debts, but I did.
Now, you were to be drawn, in a way, back to where you began, had a start, in a way, with your parents, with theatre, like Shirley Valentine, where you took on that role.
Okay, theatre, I went back into theatre, and I'd turned down many offers of theatre because, I mean, I'd turned down Broadway shows because I could earn, you know, more in one night in concert than I could in months in a theatre. But it reached a point where I needed to go back into theatre. And the first show I did was Anything Goes at the Sacramento Music Circus. 1 week rehearsal, 1 week play. And I loved it. You know, backstage smells the same all over the world. And
how does it smell?
Oh, it's a mix of things. It's a mix of sweat and dust and makeup but it was home.
Did all of that give you, the theatre, give you more professional satisfaction than music?
Oh, yes. One of the problems with having a lot of hits, and I had more than a dozen, you know, top hits, is that those are the songs that people want to hear. And so it kind of stymies you in terms of doing any new material. On the other hand, if I had not had all those hits, I probably would have ended my days singing with a trio in a Holiday Inn somewhere, if indeed I could have kept working at all.
Well, life was about to take a completely different turn. Let's see how.
The party's over. During New Year's of 2000 going into 2001, I made the decision that I was going to retire. I decided that I wanted to get out of show business because I'd been in it for more than 50 years, and I was tired, and I was bored. After my mother passed away, a sister came over from New Zealand, came to America. She brought with her this old school exercise book that she'd had as a child, and her assignment back then had been to write about her family history. And it mentioned that there was a branch of the family that had gone to Norfolk Island. But then as I'd gotten deeper into my genealogy and found out that my First Fleet ancestor had been sent here, that I became really interested in Norfolk Island. And as it turns out, this property where I am now was my First Fleet ancestor's first farm in 1792. Yeah, empty, see? All gone. I'd planned on writing a book for years, but it was going to be about my family history and my genealogical research. And I certainly didn't want to do an autobiography, and I'd had offers, but the publishers wanted something sensational, you know, sex, drugs and rock and roll, and I just hadn't lived that kind of a life and probably wouldn't have written about it if I had. Oh, my God, I thought, I've died. I must have then gone back into my body because my next... I started writing about some of my various, psychic experiences, and I couldn't write about them without putting them in the context of my life, without showing the growth, how I was affected by these experiences, how they impacted on future experiences. And before I knew it, I was writing an autobiography. Or a memoir, we call it. And I made the move here. But I found that I was going to Sydney on a regular basis, and eventually it just reached the point where I was spending more time in Sydney than I was on Norfolk Island. So my life now is very much based in Sydney. Instead of living on Norfolk and visiting Sydney, now I live in Sydney and visit Norfolk. I've lived in 7 different cities, and I think Sydney has the most to offer. I first heard about the Jessie Street National Women's Library when I was invited to speak at a fundraising event. And of course that was when I first learned about Jessie Street and what an amazing woman she was. It gives me a lot of pride as a woman that this library exists and that it is such a wonderful resource for women about their own history.
Beautiful Ethel Turner ones.
Look at this.
Yes. Early editions, we've got a lot of those.
I didn't realise she'd written so many books.
Oh, yes.
Jessie Street, she not only marched with the suffragettes in London when they were campaigning to get women the vote, but she was also the only woman in the Australian delegation to the founding of the United Nations in 1945. I really wish I'd known about her earlier because it would have been very comforting for me to know that I wasn't the only one who had some of these ideas.
Reddy was honoured as a living legend.
It was kind of weird. The bulk of my career by far was in the United States of America. And so I wasn't really expecting any Australian acknowledgement. So when it came, it was quite moving. I thank you for this very special award. And most of all, I thank you for welcoming me home. It was acceptance as well as recognition. And as I said at the end of my speech, thank you for welcoming me home. And I meant it.